Jess, I think you can get started whenever you're ready.
Okay, yeah, I will start us off. So, welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for being here with us for this workshop. And today's focus, as you see the title, is AI and assessments. And so, our plan for today is really going to give you some practical ideas for how you might start incorporating AI into different assignments or assessments you do in your classroom. So my name is Jess Dewey, and my co-presenter, Elise, you've already heard from her. We are both teaching consultants in Duke Learning Innovation. You've probably also seen Elise around because she's kind of our AI guru right now. So we'll be leading the session today. As Elise mentioned, today's discussion session is going to be recorded. So feel free to mute, shut off your camera as we're going through. You are welcome to do that. We have also enabled, or we will if we haven't already, the transcription. So you can use the automated captions in Zoom. There we go. And all of our materials will be available after our session is ended. So the slides, the transcript for today, and resources associated with all of that. You will get access to that once we're done. So we have a handful of goals today that we'll walk you through. First and foremost is we're going to start with helping you think about ways that you can talk to your students about AI, and then how that then leads into considering how you design AI assignments or assessments. We'll explore a variety of different types of AI assessments and hopefully give you a lot of different ideas for how you might start thinking about incorporating AI into your class. And then at the end, we have a guest presenter, John Ray Schneider, who is going to share with you one of the ways that he incorporates and uses AI, so you can get another kind of real world example of how it gets used. And we do want to go over our assumptions for today's session because there's a lot of talk and discussion about AI nowadays, and we want to just be clear about kind of how we're framing our presentation today. So our first assumption is that you're here because you're interested in and want to use AI in your classes, and so that's kind of where our presentation is going. We're also assuming that you're looking for strategies to incorporate AI into assignments. That is slightly different than other approaches where you might redesign assignments to kind of proof against the use of AI. That's a different approach, but that's not going to be the focus of our session today. And then our last assumption is kind of optimism. We're coming in with a positive outlook and looking for exciting ways that we can use AI and looking at it with that frame of mind. And with that, I will turn it over to Elise.
Thank you, Jess. I just want to say on a personal note, there's a lot of people that I have seen come to AI events all this semester, and I'm so glad that we've had discussions with you, and I hope they'll continue in the fall. They certainly will from my end. And if anyone's new to coming to these events, I'm publishing a blog post in the next couple days that will summarize all the ones that you missed. So it's a little bittersweet that this is our last workshop for right now, but it's been a long semester on this topic. All right, so our launching point is talking to your students. Being able to talk to our students about AI in a forthcoming manner is kind of the basis for being able to actually work with them in assignments in AI. As Jess mentioned, we're dropping the emphasis on plagiarism and avoidance and becoming more nuanced in our discussions and approach to AI. To that end, it's important for students to understand the boundaries of use, and it's also important for you to get a sense of their experience, previous experience with AI. And this conversation will lay the foundation for productive and sensible use of AI in your classroom. So I'm just gonna ask an initial question of y'all, and that is, who's already started talking to the students? And I need to find my poll thing. There we go. So have you spoken to your students about AI already? Let's see where everyone is. There's no right or wrong answer, of course. Just trying to get a read of the room. All right, looks like the majority of folks have answered, so we'll go ahead and reveal. So we look like 2/3 have already jumped in, and another 30% are waiting a little bit to figure out what they feel about it and where they want to go. I think it's great that we're already thinking about the elephant in the room and what to say. You can go ahead, Jess. All right, so the basis of the conversation is to give your students an overview of AI. I'm just going to give out 3 things that I think will be important to have a level playing field when it comes to the understanding for the entire class. Like many technologies, we assume that students know what they're doing, and it's never true. You can't count on them being knowledgeable across the board. This conversation could be an in-class discussion, a quiz, or a reading, or combo of all of the above. For me, I think there's 3 general topics that should be touched on, but these may change based on your particular field, the needs of the class, or what kind of AI tool you're using. So the 3 ones would be how it works, roughly. Some of the people on this call are experts in AI, some of us are not. And I think it's okay to explain at any level, but just having a common definition here. I've written an example text telling them that it's predictive in the sense that it's not thinking, that it's really important to have prompts that are effective to get better data out of ChatGPT, for example. And the next point that we should talk about is what it does well. Brainstorming and troubleshooting, organization and editing allows folks to follow individual paths for learning and summarizes any content. And the last one is its limitations. And when it comes to ChatGPT, there's a lot of conversations already about ethics and fair use. And the general ones that everyone agrees on is that the hallucination, it makes things up. The training is biased, just like the rest of the internet, and it's not thinking critically, and it does not contain information that's after, I'm always forgetting the date, September 21, right? So once you give your students an overview, there's also the conversation with yourself when thinking about AI in your course. And I think it's critical to think about all 3 of these questions. How will the use of AI impact learning in your course? What impact does the use of AI have on your field? And how do you envision students might use it in their careers after college? Jess, next slide. All right, so I'm just giving some example kind of conversations to have with yourself. It's going to be highly individualized. For this one, I think it would be really important to point out to students the predictive nature of something like ChatGPT. The systems are not thinking or choosing very carefully. It's all based on predictions, and that their job is to think about things critically. And the next question, one food for thought. So here I've come up with the example of coding. If you rely on coding too much, you're going to miss out on the mechanics of the coding that must be the basis for further work. And then the last question, what might AI look like in their future career? This one is written from the perspective of someone who teaches law, and coming at it of this is something that's probably going to be part of your job, and we need to talk about it and think about it right now before it's a thing all the time. All right, Jess. All right, so once you've talked to your students, well, this may not be in the same order, but one of the things that's going to be really important for you and or your students to define is the principles by which you're going to use AI. These, of course, are totally something that you can work out and think about on your own. I think key ones are differentiating between the use of AI to help us learn, but it can't replace our intellectual development. We need to be transparent about when we use it. We won't submit AI text without attribution, and that we follow guidelines of when the instructor says AI is appropriate to use. Reading through these, I realize they're a little negative, but possible. So I would suggest two different ways. You could give them a list like this and ask them to edit it, or you can ask important questions of the students and have them write the course AI principles with you. Go ahead. Yep. So I just talked about a lot of things that I think are the basis for AI assignments. I want you to know there are starting points on all of those conversations. Please don't start from the beginning, and maybe not let AI write this, but it might help too. So I'm putting these right in a slide. And remember, you're going to get this after the presentation, so you don't need to take a screenshot right this moment. All right, so the next topic that we want to talk about is how do you develop an AI assignment? And this is just setting that framework up for students to have success and for you to feel comfortable in what you've designed. So, like anything else in good course design, you need to think about the assessment or assignment goal. What skills or knowledge are the students practicing or showing with this assignment? Can the use of AI really help achieve the learning goals of the course? And conversely, will the use of AI preclude the students from progressing towards the goals? And finally, really most importantly in a way, are you asking the students to go above and beyond whatever AI assignment you're giving them? So are they using AI text to transform into something more critical or absorb it in order to have content to work with and move on? Are they looking at an AI either to critique the text itself or help them correct the writing or whatever else that they're doing? Just make sure that this AI assignment is helping them jump up to another level of something in their learning. I'm just going to throw about a couple more considerations that are kind of, I don't know, mechanic, I guess, some of the nitty-gritty points about using an AI assignment. I think we've all learned with ChatGPT, there are questions about access to that particular tool at this moment. It is free, but can get hard to get onto. So you need to think about what tools you're using and what it means for access of for students. Currently, there's a $20 a month plan for ChatGPT, but also a free version. They just may not be able to use it immediately. So you might need to have ample time for students to complete it. You can also look for alternatives. Right now, the Bing and Bard alternatives, I can't remember which one is still in pilot phase, but you need to explore, is there something else that they can get to if ChatGPT is blocked? Are there privacy concerns in the kind of information that you're asking students to enter into the AI tool? You can also consider when you're putting in a topic, are you pretty sure that biased answers may come back? Do you need to talk to students about the ethical use of AI when you're framing the particular assignment that you're giving them. And then the last consideration that I want to bring up is it may be better, at least at first, for the students and you to explore these things in class in order to have a real conversation about critique or whatever the purpose of the assignment is. So you can go through that intellectual process together. And it also gives them a chance to practice it and feel comfortable with using the tool. Now we move on to the assignment policies, or outline. You need exact instructions as you do with other assignments, of course. How long, what do the prompts need to look like? Oh, yeah, sorry. I got lost. You may need to describe the prompts that need to be, how they can move them forward, whether in the instructions they should be using the ChatGPT information to refine what they're doing in general. The next one is attribution and citation. This first one, OpenAI, you use or ChatGPT, you use the particular tool, describe that it was a response to a prompt you put in and the date it happened. Or difference might be if you want to describe in general what the prompt generally said. There's already, all of the style guides already have citation guidelines, so you're not going in blind for that. So the next one is the documentation of AI use. If you're going to give them an AI assignment, you really need to know what happened. Some of the techniques that folks are using is for the students to submit their original AI conversation with their finished work, either by track changes or printing it out. A couple different ways you can think about it. Also, another great idea is to have students reflect on what happened with the AI text. How did AI help them or not? How did they have to transform or use the AI text to move forward? And then finally, feedback. There's a couple different ways that you can provide feedback. If you're really talking about prompt generation and you want to see how they pushed the answers that ChatGPT created, you might give feedback on prompts or compare some prompts to other ones that students produced. If you're having them write a conversation, you can give feedback on that narrative that they created. And then another approach is to think about what you're grading on. So, for example, if you're having students help craft a draft, maybe it's time to alter your writing rubrics to emphasize something different or more advanced than you usually do, concentrating on student voice, their personal narrative instead of description or summary, perhaps giving more weight to their critical thought and reasoning. I encourage you, if you do change your writing rubrics, to share them with your students first and talk to them about the kind of expectations that you have in order for them to feel comfortable with what they're supposed to be creating. All that to say, once you've done the great thinking and done the great design on your assessment, don't be tempted to then chase that cheating train. It's not time to then put all their writing assignments back into some AI detection tool. Your assessment design and great thinking is going to be more impactful and more useful for students creating original work and ideas. So we're going to pause for a moment I forgot to invite you guys to type in chat whenever you were inspired by something. I was going to have Jess kind of summarize what's happening there. But if you do have comments or questions at this point, you can go ahead and type what you're thinking in chat right now. Or if you're feeling overwhelmed, we can move on.
Please, this is very, very interesting. And I work as a learning design consultant with Coursera. So of course, we are having a very difficult time with instructors these days to help them understand how to design AI assessments. So this is extremely helpful. So you might be covering in the upcoming slides, but do you have plans to maybe show us some examples of AI-based assessments? Do you have
Yes.
plans? All right. Wonderful.
Yes, that'll be in our next part. And we also will have there at the end of the slide deck, there's a bunch of links to very specific descriptions of assessments by other instructors. So if we don't say all the things that you're thinking of today, I think our resources at the end of the slide deck will also give you other ideas.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot.
And I see Carrie talking about careful design rather than catch cheaters. I'm glad that resonated with you. Oh, if you're going to use ChatGPT to help draft an assignment, should you acknowledge it? Yep. Definitely.
Yeah. And in some of our next slides, we'll kind of talk about different ways that you can do that and suggest students do that.
Right. I think we can move on. Sense a general interest in seeing the examples and
examples
that you might be able to use.
Yeah, and we will have at least one other spot after we share some examples to pause and go through kind of more of what's coming into the chat. And so now we are going to get into these examples. We'll go over a bunch of different ways that you might think about using AI in assignments. We've kind of couched them in 3 broad categories. The first one that I'm going to talk about is AI as a collaborator. And so as I'm going through, as Elise said, feel free to put ideas in the chat, put questions if they come up, anything that maybe is getting you inspired. If you're like, hey, I've used this before, I've thought about that, please share with us. We're really wanting to hear more about what everybody is currently thinking and doing with AI. And Elise is going to be kind of monitoring that as we go through. And again, we'll have another point to kind of check in after we go through some of these examples. So, like I said, I'm going to start with talking about different ways you can think of incorporating AI as a collaborator for assignments. So the first example I'll talk about is using AI to help critique work. And this is when you would have students maybe write a first draft and then use AI as a critique. And so let's say you have an assignment where you usually have students write a draft of an essay and then you give them feedback and then they have to submit a final paper or an argument paper, for example. So another midpoint in there could be asking an AI for feedback. So this could come in the form of maybe having students submit a draft of their assignment to an AI bot and asking for a critique of their arguments. So asking it, how well did I explain X, whatever that topic is that they're writing about. Another way that they might ask for critique from AI is to ask for a review of different writing mechanics. So this could be feedback on the style of the paper overall. It could also include things like transition sentences or overall audience, kind of what does the AI think the audience is. checking for how well the students wrote something in the way that they wanted to. And that kind of gets into this third point of asking the AI to rephrase. And so this is where you could have students use it as a check for understanding, kind of. So if they submit maybe a paragraph of their paper to AI and ask AI, summarize this paragraph, they can then read that summary and say, does this say what I was meaning to write in my original paper? Or is there some misconceptions they came across that maybe I need to go back and clarify? So a lot of these are getting critique and feedback from an AI on different aspects of maybe a draft essay, again, or an argument paper. One point I want to make here, though, is that there are ways in which you should probably think about directing students to write those prompts in the AI, because they could also ask an AI, hey, edit this paper. And you don't really want that, because then that's taking the work away from the student and asking the AI to do the editing work, right? But if you have students use kind of the prompts that we've suggested, like how well did I explain this, or give me feedback on this, then they'll get guidance and suggestions for improvement that then they have to work on, rather than it being the AI does the work for them, right? And sort of getting at one of the questions that came up of how do you document or say that they've used the AI to either draft or, in this case, critique work, you can incorporate that as part of the assignment, right? So if students have written a draft, gotten feedback from an AI, and then they edit their writing, you could have them track changes and make comments to specify this was a suggestion from the AI and this is what I did, to really document that process of incorporating the feedback. And you can also do more of a meta reflection of, here's how I used AI, here's what went well, here's a suggestion it made that I didn't really agree with. You can have them do a narrative documentation of their use of AI as well. And you can incorporate that to see how the entire assignment worked out with AI in the mix. Another example of using AI to help critique work could be drilling in more specifically, right? So we do already use AIs in Microsoft Word, for example, to check for spelling errors. There's systems like Grammarly that help work on grammar usage. So things like that, you can also suggest having your students use. There's also ways to use it to review sentence structure, for example. So really getting more specifically into certain aspects of a paper and how it might be written. But again, you still probably would want students to use track changes to edit their writing and show you where they incorporated anything, any suggestions from AI, and document that process of using AI. And this specific example is useful for all students, but could be especially useful if you have non-native speakers or ESL students in your class, right? It's giving them more support to work on their writing. So now shifting the focus a little bit from using AI as a critique to using AI to draft. So this is flipping the order, where you have the AI bot kind of do a first draft of some form of writing, and then students would kind of finish and work on it and complete the assignment from there. So again, if you have some kind of writing assignment that you have students do, you can say, first submit this to an AI bot and get a draft. And then students do all the work of editing. So they can, again, use track changes on that document to show how and where they edited the draft, put comments in to say, the AI suggested this, I don't really like it, or maybe this was good, but I built off of it in this way, to really edit and show their thinking process of editing before they submit the assignment. And again, you can incorporate a critique of that AI writing, a narrative summary of the process to say, maybe students might come back and say, I really would have preferred to write the first draft myself, right? They have their own experiences of using AI, and you can incorporate that as part of the assignment and have them think about and reflect on that process. A different way you can think about this too, especially if you use rubrics in your class to grade assignments, is to have AI produce a draft that then either as a group or students individually can use as practice to get a feel for your rubric, right? So they have a draft of the assignment from AI and they use your rubric to grade it. they're going to get a better idea of what you might be looking for by using your rubric on a practice draft. Then you can have a discussion in class about what things the AI might have done well, where it would have needed improvement. And then students are getting that practice so that when they go to draft the paper themselves, they have a better idea and they have an example that they can kind of think about that they've gone through and critiqued themselves. We also want to share some examples for coding. And a lot of these are going to come from a professor here at Duke, Yesenia Velasco. She's a professor of computer science. And some of these are her ideas that she's kind of thinking about maybe using in her class as well. So we wanted to share some of those. And so one way you can use AI to draft for code is to ask it to generate small snippets of code that then you have your students integrate into a larger program. And this is a really important and useful exercise for them because small snippets of code from AI are not going to very easily or cleanly integrate into a larger project, right? Students are going to have to test the code, refine it, debug it, make sure it works with their data. And that whole process is really emphasizing the use of those programming skills that you want them to know when they're learning how to code, right? So getting that draft from AI and then having students really practice the skills of incorporating that into a project. And this is another place that you can have students really document the process and limits of AI. So they can think about what worked and what didn't, which parts of those code from the AI really maybe did integrate fairly easy with only a little bit of refinement, and which ones really didn't work. Because I've seen examples, of AI can hallucinate and make things up with code as well and make up packages that don't actually exist, right? So that's something that they would need to figure out if that's correct or not. And then you can also have students kind of compare and contrast different implementations of this problem and look at if there's different ways that maybe one student's AI program suggested this and another student's program suggested that, and they're different. You can compare and contrast and see which one works better. And again, a lot of that is the skills of comparing and reviewing and making sure you know what's working for your code, and there's different ways to do it. And so they get that skills practice and get to review different ways of incorporating code as well. Shifting a little bit again, so another kind of subcategory that we wanted to share within using AI as a collaborator is using AI to brainstorm. So now this is moving AI from either kind of the critique of work or the drafting of work to really being part of that thinking process. So you could, for example, have AI generate ideas about a topic. Let's say you in your class are talking about elephants in Kenya. So you can put that into AI and ask it, generate 5 ideas about this topic. And then maybe students can use those as writing prompts that they build off of. Part of that, you could incorporate having students go back and ask AI to revise its output, maybe make the ideas that it gave you more specific. So maybe elephants in Kenya was too broad. Maybe you want them in winter, adding more detail to get more specific ideas that students can then build off of as writing prompts. And again, incorporating the documentation of this process. So how did students go about doing this? What follow-up questions did they ask to get more clarification or more specific ideas? And then how did they build off of that for their writing assignment? And then another couple of ideas for how you could use AI to brainstorm, really moving in a really creative way, right? So we don't only have AI like ChatGPT that produces writing, but we do have AIs that produce images. You've seen a couple in our slides already, right? So you can use image generators as well for ideas. So if you submit the elephants in Kenya prompt to an image generator and get back an image, then you could have students maybe do a reflective writing of the image, free writing, creative writing, create a story about that image. And that's really giving them that brainstorming space. So they start with this image and then have to work from there. Another kind of fun example that you can have in your class maybe is to have AI do things like plan a 3-day trip to Italy. So this could be in your class where you want students to think about different localities around the world and what they might do to learn about those different areas or cultures. And especially even if it's a language class, you can have AI produce this in Italian even, right? Or in that language. And then maybe you ask students to plan the fourth day, go through what the AI produced and say, maybe on day 2, it suggested something that I'm not interested in doing or isn't going to be very useful, explain why they might want to change that plan, research the area, find different things that they might want to do or learn about, and then share with the class, right? So a lot of different creative ways that you can use AI in your assignments or in assessments in class. And again, it all really comes back to what are your goals for these assignments and assessments, right? What skills you want students to practice. So these are all different examples of ways that you might hit on different skills. And finally, kind of our last subcategory for AI as a collaborator is using AI as a thinking partner. So this example is actually going to happen in your class itself. So incorporating that AI into a think, pair, share. So think, pair, share is when you have students think individually about a question, pair up to discuss, and then have a larger share out with your class. But if you wanted to incorporate AI as a thinking partner here, you could have students first think individually about the question, pair up to discuss, and then actually submit the question to AI and see what the AI says and rethink about their answers, discuss what the AI came up with, see if they agree with it, and then have a share out. So now you're incorporating AI in that thinking process and having students really think critically about what the AI might say and how they feel about the response from that. And then finally, bringing again another example from Yesenia about coding. You can have AI help with coding and be a thinking partner with coding as well. And so, for example, if you give students faulty code, some code that you know doesn't work, maybe they use AI in that process of trying to fix the code or find errors. So they could generate test cases or use the AI to fix errors after the students are kind of brainstorming about where the errors might be. So again, using that AI in that thinking process. You could also, this is kind of similar to the previous example, but ask AI to generate a solution to something that students have already solved. And so students have a way that they've solved it and kind of thought about the problem. Then you can ask AI for a different solution and have students again compare and contrast and think about different ways that you might solve a problem. And also that gets at a bigger kind of topic of programmers are all different too, right? One person might not come up with the same solution as another, but maybe both solutions work. So really thinking about the different ways that a problem could be solved. AI can be really useful for that as well. And again, as with all of these, you can have students document this process, think about what questions they ask to the AI to get at fixing any problems that they're looking at solving, any refinements they made to the code that the AI produced, if the code worked, and if they had to change it. All of those things can be in a narrative documentation of the process of using AI in the assignment. Okay. We'll pause again and see. It looks like maybe there's been more activity in the chat.
Now that we actually prompted y'all to start thinking. Yvonne posed a question related to if you ask students to draft and then kind of move their work up a level, do students feel resistance to that? The grading is somehow harder, or do people have thoughts about how you can deal with that change in grading? That was one thing that came up. I don't know if we have great answers. My particular inclination is to just figure out ahead of time what you're expecting to see on that next level. And probably that's going to have to relate with making connections between sources that you read, or making connections to your personal life or the discussions in class, or comparing, contrasting texts. Kind of depends on what the writing assignment is, but maybe people have other ideas that they want to type in the chat or thoughts. People were commenting on Yesenia's ideas, which were fantastic. I've been meeting with faculty members throughout the semester on a smaller committee, and we're trying to work through those thoughts. And I just thought hers were so insightful that we should just add them and have her do the talking. Does anyone else want to take this moment to say something that they're doing already in this vein? All right, well, we'll move forward and you guys can keep thinking and keep being inspired. It's my turn now. So I'm jumping into another category of AI use. And for me as a humanities person, it's the one that I find the most interesting. It kind of opens a new space for us as instructors. Gives us a chance to spin learning in a new way that we don't traditionally do or think about in our disciplines. Using it as a playful tool affords a sense of levity that's often hard to create in a genuine fashion in an academic setting. Thinking about AI as this kind of third player helps us really in the creativity space and hopefully pushing students to have more engagement and a broader engagement with the content. And I'll go ahead and go through the ideas. So the first one is using AI to take on a persona. For me, I find AI gets much more interested when it's not summarizing things, but when it has a character to play or a scenario to react to as a character. So you can give it prompts, something like the identity of the character, your chef or a chef wants something, maybe it's a happy chef or aggravated chef. You can think about the experiences it has. Maybe that chef wants to win the James Beard Award and you're asking, what can that happen? Another one here is ask AI to answer questions as if it's Buzz Aldrin. You can start with a question like, what was it like on the moon? Then it maybe moves to, how are the moon and Earth related? Or how did you get prepared to be an astronaut? Really important when we think about these prompts is never ask it you, because then it tells you it's an AI and it doesn't have a personality. But you have to say, what would Buzz Aldrin say? So maybe from conversations like that, students can research something interesting that they read and check it for validity to see if it was real or not. Or if they already have knowledge going in, perhaps they critique the answers that were given by the AI based on what they already know, something like that. And then the other part to think about when we think about AI as taking on a persona is as a conversation partner. So I work with language faculty, so I'm always thinking about what could happen to them. So maybe a student needs to practice vocabulary about trips or art, whatever it might be. It starts a conversation in French with AI. Tell me about the best museum in Paris. It asks follow-up questions. It saves that entire chat conversation and submits it to the instructor so the instructor can look at the students' grammar. Are these in the right vocabulary? It's much easier for a student who's stressed out about learning a foreign language to do it with someone who is not judgmental. It's a practice space for them to work with the AI. So the next category in play is using AI as the foil. So this is the counterpoint to the intellectual development that we're already working on in our courses. We've already been playing with that as a society. How do we prove that we're smarter than AI? So for example, you can use the AI to be the imposter in test review. Students write sample questions for a test. You've had AI generate sample questions for a test. That list is collated. The students work in groups trying to find the AI questions. Through that process, they're thinking already about the test review, how to answer the questions. Is this a well-developed question? What can we say about it? So that's that thing about finding the fake. In the second example here, we can use AI as the foil to create a new perspective on what we're studying. So perhaps students ask AI to generate something unexpected related to physics, for example. So maybe the assignment in class or in discussion board, whatever it might be, tell me a joke about the theory of relativity. Maybe another student asks AI to write a short story that's written by Einstein as the narrator. Kind of let them kind of push themselves to think about their subject matter in different ways. And finally, I'm going to go through the category as using AI as a game engine, not quite what I mean, not quite the definition that it meets, but it's how I'm going to describe it anyway. AI is really good for gamification in teaching. In one sense, because it allows faculty members to write things quickly. So you could ask it to write a multiple choice quiz about chemical compounds, and some of the questions are really not going to be great or don't really relate to what you're teaching, but some of them may be great, and you use it as a poll at the beginning of class for students to answer and compare their answers and talk about them. Maybe you let it create a trivia game about schizophrenia for test review, again, using polling or some sort of competition for the students. The next thing is the class could play a game with AI. All the students ask AI to write haikus about a concept in physics and share them. It's also possible to play 20 questions with GPT. And that could be, I'm thinking you pick a word and ChatGPT starts asking you questions about it. You could be critiquing or seeing the direction it goes in order to try and guess your item. All right. So the last kind of use of AI in teaching that we're going to hit on today is AI as tutor. Using AI as a tutor is a common scenario that's already been happening before our huge discussions this semester about AI. There's a lot of different platforms. Duolingo is probably one of the most common ones we think about. It's really important to realize that the natural language algorithm that ChatGPT uses will probably be pushing these platforms forward in the kind of tutoring that it does pretty rapidly. I'm just going to introduce 3 purposes of AI tutors. The first one that we think about is using AI to explain content. So students can ask AI to clarify a concept that they're really not getting in class. Instructors could use AI to get more materials for students who are struggling with a concept in class, like a better definition, things like that, or more resources. Then the next kind of category of tutoring that we can think about is using AI as a learning coach. So this is a little bit further along than just getting extra information. The student can use AI to get some clarity on what they're doing right or wrong when solving problems. Maybe they ask AI to give them more problems to solve, review problems to solve based on the ones they're already doing in class. AI can also coach instructors who need teaching ideas. I really need to have some more ideas of what to do in class discussions, debate topics. AI can generate for the faculty to help them coach their students along in the learning process. And the last kind of coaching category that we're going to talk about is adaptive learning. ChatGPT is not really doing that yet, but a bunch of other programs already do. When we think about adaptive learning, this is really that the instructor has picked teaching goals or outcomes in the background in the program. Here they need to define fractional reserve banking, be able to describe its risks and apply it to real cases. AI is then in charge, along with the instructor, of course, to assess the mastery of the students as they move along and provide interventions to help them move forward in the mastery of topics that they're supposed to be able to reach by the end of the semester, or skip ahead to other topics. So this category itself is going to be related to our guest speaker, who's going to be talking to us in just a minute. So this is really going to end the presentation for Jess and I. We will be moderating a discussion with our guest speaker in a bit. So I just want to give a closing kind of poll. Your head is probably filled with ideas, I hope. So this poll question is, what kind of AI assignment are you excited to try first? And I realize that some of you are already trying them first, so let's pretend it's next, or something you love already. All right, I'll go ahead and share the results. So I think it's probably not really a surprise to us that as writing collaborator is there on the top. It is something that ChatGPT does well, and it's easier to understand the applications of AI on writing itself. But I'm glad to see that others are getting play, and AI's coding collaborator is the lowest, not necessarily because there are fewer folks that code in this group, but I think it can be acknowledged that it is a little harder to figure out how to use ChatGPT or whatever other product without giving students too much code and skipping some of the learning process. All right, thank you for participating in that. Oh, and just saying thanks, and please contact us if you want to talk more about it. But let's turn now to our guest speaker. All right, so John Reifschneider is the director and the Master of Engineering program in AI for product innovation. From his title slide alone, you can guess that John is not a newcomer to the use of AI. I'm just going to give you his short CV to get a sense of the experience he brings to this discussion. Among other degrees, he holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from UVA and a Master in Engineering Management here from Duke. He spent some time, I guess, a number of years, a decade, 15 years in management roles in data services and analytic companies. This AI tool that he's going to present today was not just created on the fly, although sort of. He's already been working in a larger suite of learning tools that he's developed over the years for students. I know what he's going to present today is probably going to feel above and beyond of where the majority of us are when it comes to teaching with AI. But I think it's a really good indication of what AI will bring to us in the future in a wider sense for a bigger audience. And I'm positive that because of the new algorithm and the kind of approach, anything that exists now is going to be pushed forward, and there's going to be products developed quite rapidly that will become more commonplace in teaching. So let's give a round of thumbs up for John to agree to presenting today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Elise. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see many of you I know, and nice to meet all of those of you who I don't know. As Elise said, my name is John Reifschneider, and I run our AI Masters of Engineering program for Pratt School. I also have sort of a personal passion around how we can use AI to improve quality and access to education. And so, as Elise mentioned, for a few years now, I've been building some different tools which attempt to do just that. So I'm going to show you today, we're now getting to kind of the show and tell portion of the day here. And so I'm going to show you a tool that I started building last fall, and it's actually currently still under development. And so I'm going to give my usual disclaimer that right now, as we wrap up our semester, and I'm in between the spring classes and my summer class coming up in a couple of weeks, this tool is in active development, so I can't promise that it's going to work bug-free for us today, but let's cross our fingers and hope for the best here. The tool I'm going to show you is a tool called ClassWise. As I mentioned, I started building it last fall. And it really acts as sort of a course management tool. So you could think of Sakai or Canvas. It has some similar functionality to that, but really focuses on sort of the learning aspect and how we can support both instructors and learners in terms of teaching and learning. Whereas Sakai Canvas tend to act much more as kind of a student information system for managing and distributing content, exams, and then, of course, managing a grade book, which is an important part of what they do. So while I actually use this kind of standalone to manage my class, you can also use this as sort of an extension of a system like a Sakai or Canvas. So before we jump into the demo, a little bit of background on where this tool came from. I joined Pratt about 3.5 years ago from Korean industry. And when I first started teaching, I pretty quickly ran into a little bit of frustration as I got through my first couple of weeks of teaching. And that frustration resulted from the fact that I felt like really what I was doing is sort of standing up there and lecturing every week and then giving some assignments. And I didn't feel like I had a great way to really understand whether the students in my course were really following along or not, or if they weren't, where were they struggling? And I wouldn't find that out until we actually got to, maybe the first homework, if I crafted the assignments in a way that aligned with the learning objectives, or more likely, probably the midterm exam, and then I'd see how everybody did and see where the issues were. And so the first thing I did, which I think is probably fairly natural, is to start doing some weekly quizzes. And I thought that would be a good way to kind of assess on a weekly basis how everybody was doing. So we did 10-question multiple choice weekly quizzes in Sakai every week. And that was sort of moderately helpful to me. So what I did is I took the results from the quiz, I sort of looked through all of it, and then tried to figure out, who understood what and where the learning gaps were, both for individual students and then for the class as a whole, and then tried to use that information from that process to to inform my teaching, so that I can spend more time, for example, on topics that I saw that a number of people seemed to be struggling with. And as I said, that worked okay, but there were still some challenges with that approach. One, it's a lot of effort to craft 100, 200 multiple choice questions for a semester. Two, there are issues with multiple choice questions. They're not always great as a formative assessment technique. They don't really provide feedback to learners other than just knowing whether you got something right or wrong. So they weren't really ideal. And then probably the most importantly, they still required a lot of manual effort to interpret the results of what's going on. I mean, I could see that, student A got 8 out of 10 and student B got 10 out of 10 and student C got 6 out of 10. But that was really only helpful at kind of an aggregate level that didn't really tell me, well, student A got 8 out of 10. What was it that he or she didn't understand? I'd have to actually dive into the questions and look at their answers. And it was a really time-consuming process to try to figure out all that information, which is stuff I really wanted to know, because if I know that, it can help inform my teaching and I can do a better job teaching the entire class and also providing more personalized guidance to teach my students. So I started exploring ways that I can use AI to help with some of this, and I developed a tool that over the last couple of years has gone through a couple of iterations, and it's now turned into a tool that I call ClassWise. And over time, I've kind of moved away from sort of multiple choice quizzes and trying to distill insights out of that to a more natural approach, which is actually a conversational approach with students. One of the things I realize is that I can, if I can have a 5-10 minute conversation with each student about each of the topics they're learning in the class, I can pretty quickly understand whether they're following along or not, or if not, where their gaps are. But it's unrealistic for me to have a 5-10 minute conversation with every student in my class every week about every topic. On the other side, that's exactly what generative AI can do, as we've all seen with ChatGPT. It has basically infinite capacity to have conversations with people about different topics. So actually, before ChatGPT came out, I had been sort of experimenting with its predecessor called GPT-3 and looking at how I could use this to have sort of automated conversations with students around the content and the topics they were learning in my class, and then use the data from those conversations to then inform me whether the students were understanding each of the topics or not. And this as GPT-3 has turned into GPT 3.5, ChatGPT to GPT-4. The technology has gotten better and better to the point where it's actually realistic to do this. When I first started trying to do it, it was, let's just say it wasn't quite there yet. It was a little clunky. The students noticed that some of the conversations weren't great. But I with the maturing of the technology, even over the last 6 months or so, I've noticed a significant difference, and the level of the technology now is sort of caught up to what I'm trying to do with it. So I started building the tool in the fall. I piloted it in one of my spring classes this spring with my students. That happens to be a course focused on deep learning or neural networks, which is the perfect course to pilot this type of thing in, because the students are fascinated by just understanding how the tool works and getting a chance to try it. And it ended up being a lot of fun because it was sort of under continuous development over the semester. And every week when we got together for class, we would sort of talk about what I had added to the tool or what I had changed or bugs I had fixed over the previous week. And then I could get feedback from the students on things that they really liked or things that weren't working so well for them, and continue to iterate on it. And the whole process was sort of transparent to the students, so they had a chance to get sort of a behind the scenes view on the development of the whole thing, which was a really, really cool experience. So we had a successful pilot, both in terms of student engagement and also in improvement actually outcomes, I use a set of summative assessments that I've been using now for 3 semesters teaching the class, and we had a positive impact on the class results on my summative assessments this semester. So that was encouraging. And I'm going to continue using the tool for my summer class coming up in a couple of weeks, and then next fall, I'm actually hoping to try to expand the use and get some other folks using it for very different subjects. And so if anybody has a particular interest in what they see today, please reach out, and we'd love to talk to you about trying it out for your class. So with that as sort of background, let's now get to the fun part where we'll actually take a look at the tool and what this does. So let's share my screen here. Okay, I think everybody should be able to see this now. So this is ClassWise. This is a demo version I set up for our conversation today. I out of respect for the privacy of my students, I'm not going to show you my actual class and student results here today. So I set up a little sort of demo class for us to play around in. The tool is available on classwise.org. You won't be able to sign up for an account or use it right now. It's sort of password protected. So if you do want to try it out, just let me know. So this is the instructor view, and I'm going to kind of flip-flop between the instructor portal and then the student portal. So I'm going to start on the instructor side right now. As you can see, this is a class I created called AIPF 506. I've got what I call a course feed. So a little bit different than Sakai that we're all used to. In ClassWise, everything happens as a feed. So think about your sort of LinkedIn feed, right? You have a feed of items or things you need to do for the class that might be watching a lecture video, might be reading a paper, watching a YouTube video, doing an assignment, doing a quiz, something else. It's all on a feed of things to do. And so this is the feed I've set up for our current class demo here. We've got 2 modules. We're going to do a little fun with machine learning here today for everybody. And I've got some lectures. I've got a paper to read. I can put some videos, so I can publish all my content here into the feed for my students. And when students consume this content, so they watch a lecture video, they read the paper, they have to engage in a conversational dialogue with our class chatbot that we call EdBot. And EdBot will ask them some questions, and they'll have to provide some answers, and EdBot will give them some feedback on their answers, and then they can ask EdBot questions and so on. And all of this interaction gets logged and recorded as data, and then it gets distilled into some analytics that then I can see, which helps me understand how well everybody is doing in terms of understanding the topics of the class. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this sort of process works from the instructor side, and then we'll flip over to the student side and see how things look from the student side. So let's go ahead and add let's add a lecture in module 2, our NLP, Natural Language Processing module here. So I'm going to add a lecture since we're talking about generative AI, which is based on a model called the transformer model. We're going to add a lecture about transformers here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this when I flip tabs or not, but I'm going to go to WarpWire, and I'm going to grab the link to my lecture video on transformers. Put that in here. Topic transformers. And then I'm going to upload some lectures, my lecture slides here. Okay. And we'll set a due date here. Okay, and I'm going to require my students to go through a conversation with EdBot around this lecture that they've just watched. So I'll check that, and then I can specify how much of a conversation I want to have. So I'm just going to have two questions per topic I covered. In this case, I just covered one topic, transformers. So let's submit that. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to publish this item out to the feed for each of the students in the class to now go through. And then secondly, since I've requested to do a conversational knowledge check with EdBot for this, it's going to review the material, and it's going to create first drafts of a couple of questions on this lecture. Okay, and so we can see here's 2 questions since I asked for 2. And these are questions based on the information from my lecture. So this is not using kind of generic ChatGPT background information. This is specific to the lecture I just published on here. So it actually drafts a question and a model answer. Why does it draft a model answer? The main reason is because when EdBot interacts with the students and asks this question, and then the students respond, it then compares the student's response to the model answer I created, and it uses that and a rubric to determine how close they are to the model answer, and then provide them some feedback. So I can go through and change these or replace them if I wanted to, but actually a large percentage of the time these end up being really good questions. So and in this case, these are actually very good questions. So let's just go with those. Okay, so I've just added this Transformers lecture to my feed here. So now let me switch over to the student side. We'll take a look at the course from a student perspective here. All right, so this is now the student portal that we're in here. We can see EdBot up top. I'll come back to him and show you what we can do with him in a minute, but this is the course feed that I've got so far in this course. I've got my to-do feed, and then I can switch over. I've got a few items I've already completed in my completed feed. We can see down here, here's the lecture I just published. So let's go ahead and open that up. I can see the lecture here embedded, and I can go ahead and watch the lecture. And if I have any questions as I'm watching the lecture, I can ask EdBot a question. So do that, and that's going to take a second. And then the way that this works is that if I ask a question, EdBot attempts to answer the question based on the material from the class. So again, it's not sort of generic ChatGPT. You're just typing the question. It's trying to formulate an answer based on the material in the class, either from this lecture or from other papers, lectures, etc. And it will then attempt to formulate an answer. It will only pull in what I call sort of background knowledge, so knowledge it's been trained on previously, if needed to support the formulation of the answer. So it first tries to formulate a complete answer based on your own materials, and so it's done a pretty thorough job here explaining how the self-attention mechanism works in the transformer. Okay. So once we're finished up watching that lecture, we can mark this as done. The first thing it'll do is prompt the student to do for a self-assessment of how well they feel they've understood the material in this particular lecture. So let's say it was clear. And now it's going to ask a few questions to the student. Okay. So let's just say EdBot asks a question: what is multi-headed attention in transformers? Just say we don't know. And EdBot will now hopefully explain to us what multi-headed attention is in the transformer model. And so yep, okay. Go. So let's go to the next one. What is the attention mechanism in transformers? So let's just type something somewhat reasonable. And so you can see how this sort of dialogue has sort of replaced the idea of a weekly, 10-question multiple choice quiz. It's a lot more natural. It's a lot more valuable to the students because they actually get a chance to, one, do free response, which I find tends to, do a lot better than multiple choice as far as improving recall. I can put detailed questions and ask them to explain things or compare things. And then they get real-time feedback on the responses, which is generally pretty useful feedback. Okay, and so all of this engagement again is logged and stored and used both for the students' benefit and for my benefit to inform me. It's based on mastery, so it's not graded. You got a 9 out of 10 or whatever. It's kind of a pass-fail based on mastery. And so in this case, I got one question wrong, one right. I didn't reach the mastery threshold, so I'm prompted to have to redo this. And so I'll go back and watch the video, then I'll redo it until I've mastered it, and then I'm able to move on. So the entire platform is based on the idea of mastery. You can only move on to items in your feed once you've completed previous items. Okay, so I'm not going to try again right now. Let's go back. But I would normally try again until I was able to pass that, and then that would be removed from my feed as being completed, and then I'd be able to move to some of these other items in my feed. Okay, a couple other things that on the student side you can do. So I showed you the Edbot up top. I can do a few things. One, my personal favorite, I can get Edbot to tell me jokes about the things that we learn in class, and I'd say about half the time these are actually funny, and the other half there's room for improvement, let's say, but they're entertaining and they're actually based on the topics in the class. So there is actually a little bit of a learning component involved in them as well. Okay, enough jokes. The other thing we can do is get Edbot to give us kind of an overview of how we're doing in the class. So I've got 6 items in my course feed. I've got 2 of them completed, and I've got one topic that's flagged me as having a learning gap. And so the way this works is it looks through all the interaction you have with Edbot, and it operates on kind of a red, yellow, green system. So if you have a potential gap, it's a yellow or orange in this case. If you have a likely gap, it's a red flag. That's based on both the self-assessment. So if you self-assess as not understanding something, as well as your engagement with Edbot in the knowledge check chat. So if it takes you 5 tries to finally pass a knowledge check chat, for example, that then gets flagged as meaning it's likely you probably haven't fully gotten that topic. And this can change over the course of the class as you engage with more items around that topic. You can go from a red to maybe a green at some point. Okay, so I've got an issue with convolutional neural networks. It looks like I've given myself a low self-rating. Would you like any help on this? So I can actually get some tutoring from Edbot if I'd like on this particular topic, or some other topic. But let's say I didn't really understand convolutional neural networks when I watched the lecture. I'd like to get a little bit of tutoring here. All right, so now we go into what I call study session with Edbot. And so the first thing Edbot's going to do is give me kind of a summary of what we've learned about convolutional neural networks so far in this class. And this is, again, automatically generated summary based on my lectures and papers and other things in the class. So we've seen convolutional neural networks, or CNNs as they're called, just once so far in this class, which was our Introduction to CNNs lecture. And here's a nice summary of the things we've learned in the lecture. Again, this was automatically generated from my lecture notes. If I have some questions, I can ask questions about convolutional neural networks, or I can ask Edbot to quiz me and ask me a few questions. Okay, so if I want Edbot to quiz me, I can just hit that, and Edbot will now pull all the material on CNNs that we've covered in the class. We'll use that material to formulate some questions on CNNs, and then we'll ask me some questions. start an answer here. Second to assess my answer. It should be reasonable. Yep, it is. And I just had it set for one question, but I can have basically an unlimited source of questions about any particular topic based on materials I've covered in my class, which is one of the really nice things about using AI. Okay, so that's a quick run through the student side. We got some of the standard stuff I can send. I, as the instructor, I can send messages out to everybody, which go to their email and show up here, and do some other things, you know, some of the functionality you see in Sakai or Canvas, for example. So let's go back over to the faculty side, and now I'll show you sort of what happens with all of that data that gets collected through the interactions here by all the students. Okay, so we're back on the instructor side. So let's go to the class analytics here. So I've got some nice dashboards here. I've got 4 students in this demo class. All of them happen to be me. But normally I have a long list of all my students, and this is kind of your standard progress report, right? So I can see how well students are progressing on each of the modules. So I've got 2 modules so far. Most of my students are not done those modules yet, the gray X. 2 of my students finished up module 1, but they had some issues, so it's flagged there. Okay, and I can actually dive in, click on this, and I can look and see where the particular issue was. In this case, that particular student had an issue with CNNs, convolutional neural networks, and had a low self rating, but they actually did well on the knowledge check. They passed the knowledge check with EdBot on the first try there. Okay, so that's all logged there, and then I can click on this tab called Learning Gaps, and now I can see, rather than kind of by item or by module, which is our normal way of kind of thinking about student progress, I can see by topic that we cover, and I can get a dashboard of here's the topics we've covered in the class, and here's how well the students seem to be doing on each of the topics. And so this one is showing me the topics with the most likely learning gaps in the class. And I can get a count here of number of students that have that are red flagged for that topic, orange flagged, meaning there's a potential knowledge gap there. And then I can see a list of my students, and I can see, again, kind of that red, yellow, green system of how well they seem to be doing on each of the topics based on both their self-assessment across all the items related to that topic, as well as how well they've been doing in these knowledge check chats with EdBot. On these topics. And so again, these change and evolve as students progress through the course and do more and more items relating to each of these topics. Okay. So this is really nice insight I found for me to kind of, in a nice snapshot, understand sort of where the big issues are kind of across the class, and then for any given student where he or she or seem to be having some challenges. And then now the next question is what do you do about it? And so generally speaking, if I see a large portion of the class has an issue on a certain topic, I will spend some extra time in the next week class on that particular topic. We'll go through questions, et cetera. If I see a particular student maybe is struggling, I might ask that student to come to office hours or try to make some one-on-one time with that student to talk through some of the issues. And then there's also a couple of remediation techniques I've built just into the tool itself, in addition to sort of my personal remediation in class or office hours. So I can also do a couple of other things. I might, for example, if I saw that student didn't understand CNNs, I might go find a really nice YouTube tutorial on CNNs, and I might assign a YouTube video to that student. And I can actually publish this not for the entire class, because not everybody needs this video, but only for students that have a potential knowledge gap on that topic. So I can I can select individual students to publish this into their feed, or I can publish it, for example, into the feed for all students who are red flagged on that topic right now. So I can give them some additional resources along with sending like a draft message to them that I've added I saw you might not have understood that very well, and I've added a video into your feed for you. And then let's talk and see if that has helped you understand that. I can also require them to go through a study session, for example, on that particular topic, where they'll have to, again, go through have that dialogue with EdBot and get some explanations of things. So so I've been trying kind of piloting those out as some remediation techniques in addition to sort of me, spending time with students one-on-one or covering remediation topics in class. Okay, so we're just towards the end of our time here, I think, for our session today. That was a kind of a quick tour of the tool that I built, and I want to make sure, see if we have any questions and if we can tackle these. I see a number of them in the chat. We start with Olivia's question here. Thanks. The question is this part of an online class? Can I register for this myself? Yeah, so I originally kind of built it with the idea of primarily using this for online classes. As we all know, during the pandemic, when we're all teaching online, the challenge of kind of sort of engaging with students and understanding whether they're whether they're keeping up with the class or not is compounded when you talk about online teaching versus when you're face to face in the classroom every week. So I think it's probably most powerful for online teaching, but I actually am using it for my in-person classes as well. So I've moved to a flipped classroom model now for my classes, where I publish chunked up lectures each week. I have the students watch the lectures, go through, have the conversations with EdBot, and then before we show up to class for that week, I look through the dashboards, understand how everybody's doing, and then I sort of customize my, where I put my focus during our in-class sessions on topics that it seems like students are maybe struggling with. Okay, let's see here. Is there, sorry, can you access it? Yeah, so if you go to classwise.org, you'll see the website, but you won't be able to access it because there's a password to keep people out unless I know about it. So the best way is just email me if you're interested in trying it out, playing around with it, or maybe putting a class in it. Just email me and I'll help you get set up and using it. And again, I would love to have some, if there's any volunteers that find it interesting and would like to give it a shot, I would love to have some and continue to get some feedback to keep improving the tool. Another question from Olivia. It looks like there's a learning curve for instructor to set up. Hopefully the class size guaranteed persistence. So all of your information is stored. It's logged. There's a large graph database behind it that sort of stores information for each of your classes. Nobody else can access that class other than you and your students. So it's never shared with anybody else. And classwise.org is just my own. It's just the URL for this tool that I built. I have it's public because I have to have students have a way to access the tool. Question from Lisa, can the instructor upload a text, PowerPoint, or video? Yes, we ran out of time. I was going to show you too how that you can actually upload a paper. So for example, if your class happens to use academic papers that your students read, or if you like web articles or something like that, case studies, you could just put in either, you can upload the PDF of a paper, or you could just even put in a URL to like a blog or to a PDF paper or something. And it works the same way as what we did with the lecture slides. It'll grab all the text of that paper or that blog, and then it can formulate questions, and the student will then engage with EdBot in questions around that paper or article, whatever. Question from Patrick: how the map between topics, questions answered, and student performance built? Yeah, so it's behind the scenes. It's a large, not to get too technical, but it's kind of a large graph database. So think about a graph or a network, and you have students, and then as nodes in the graph, you have each student. You have topics as nodes in the graph. Students are connected to topics, and then there's relationships, and that graph stores information about the connection of students and topics, particularly where they've seen the topic, how the results of their self-assessments, the results of their EdBot chats, et cetera. It's all kind of stored in this large graph, and there's a separate graph created for each class that's then set up in the tool. Question for Brad: how many topics do you track per week? Yeah, so in a given week, I like to chunk my lectures up into kind of 15, 20-minute max. I wish they're a little smaller, but it seems to be about the smallest I can get right now. And so I probably have, probably 6 to 8 topics per week, I would say, that we cover in my class. Every class will differ, and it depends on kind of the level of granularity that an instructor thinks about the topics that they cover in their class. But for me, it's, kind of on the average, I'd say, 6 to 8-ish discrete topics per week that we cover. Question from Peggy: do you have a mechanism to determine whether the knowledge gap is due to student not doing the reading, or did the reading but still lacks in understanding? Right now, no, not a great way to tell if the student just skipped the video entirely and tried to answer the questions on their own, or watched the video and tried to answer the questions and did poorly. Not a great way to determine that right now, although there are some things I can build in, for example, to do checks to make sure that people actually clicked and watched the video and that kind of thing if I wanted to. But no, right now I don't distinguish between sort of just not reading or watching the material versus did it but still struggling. Question from Tammy: time investment for setup. Yeah, so it's really very simple. You can set up a class in about 5 minutes, but then you need to create your feed for the class. If we run over time, I'd kind of show you, but if you have all your lectures, all your readings, everything available in WarpWire or on your computer or whatever, it really shouldn't take you more than probably an hour or 2 max to kind of create your feed, assuming you have everything well organized and accessible there. It's pretty simple. Like we uploaded that lecture video, you just go in, create your lecture videos, paste in your link to the video, upload your lecture slides, and then publish. So it's pretty quick to do. The question for Bobby: have you had any students trying to quickly game the system by only interacting with EdBot to try to get answers? Yes. So that is one of the risks that I haven't found a good way to prevent yet. Is two things. One, there's really nothing to prevent a student from kind of grabbing the question, going over the ChatGPT, putting in ChatGPT to try to get a reasonable answer, and then coming back. And so I haven't found a great way to avoid that yet. I have some thoughts, in particular, moving the chats from written to actually verbal discussion with EdBot rather than typing discussion, which is one thing that I think can help. But right now, no, there's not a great way to prevent that, although it's something I'm sort of thinking through. It might, the way I sort of rationalize it is that honestly, even if they're, taking a question, going to ChatGPT, pasting and getting an answer, even if they're doing that, hopefully at least they're learning something out of it by reading the answers. This is not a graded exercise. This doesn't impact, they don't receive kind of a grade on each of these things. It's formative assessment only based on mastery. So, so it's really, hopefully there's not as much of an incentive for that, doing that kind of thing. Let me see. Thanks for the good comments. Question from Peggy: sometimes assign an article to read, but don't expect them to gain a deep understanding of portions of it. Do you have a way to tell the tool which parts of an article are the focus versus parts of the article that are only to be read for context? Yeah, so one way you can do that is by your choice of topics. So let's say you publish an article and has a bunch, kind of covers of several different topics, but there's really only kind of one topic in it that you want students to really sort of pay attention to and get. So when you add that article, it asks you to put in the topics for the article. So you just put in that one topic, and what the tool does is then reviews all the text of the article and formulates questions only about that topic. So not kind of general questions about the entire thing, but questions specific to whatever topic or topics you've asked it to create questions on. So that's really the way to tell it to kind of focus on specific parts of a lecture or specific parts of a paper that you really want students to focus on.
Hey, John, I'm just going to interrupt for a moment because more questions keep coming in, and I'm afraid we're running out of time. I've suggested that folks go ahead and reach out to you to have these more in-depth conversations. I think you're open to that.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Please reach out if you're interested, you want to learn more, you want to maybe try it for a class or something like that. Would welcome that because I love the opportunity to get more feedback from people who teach classes very different to my own. So that would be great. So please reach out by email. The email's in the chat.
All right, so I want to
Okay.
thank, sorry.
Yeah, well, I think we'll wrap it up. Sorry, we're a couple of minutes over, and thanks for all the great questions and feedback. Again, please reach out if you have any more questions. And thanks everybody for hanging in there and for the time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, John, for coming. And I know that ClassWise is huge, but remember you have smaller interventions available to you. And I'm looking so forward to hearing what's happening in everyone's classes in the fall. Enjoy your summers, everyone. And know that you can reach out to Jess and I for other conversations as well.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I think I'll stop recording, pause, stop.